Greetings, friends. Kambria Evans here, the teaching and learning EMDR consultant. And y'all, today's episode on the Zero Disturbance podcast is chock full of questions. It is like a buffet of conversation today. I'm very excited about this. And these are just really common questions that I hear all the time from other clinicians, from potential clients, from friends. And I'm going to share the questions with you today, give you my answers, give you something to chew on in order to help you figure out these things as you navigate your own therapy process or as you enter therapy as a client. Help you break up with a therapist who might be kind of unhealthy and not working for you anymore. And this is also for therapists today too. If you're a talk therapist, if you're a brain-based modality therapist like EMDR, brain spotting, or art, I want you to hear the thought process so that it will inform how you get to show up with your clients and with your own therapist as well, right? Because us healers should all have our own guides in this crazy journey called life. Okay, so one of the most common questions I get from people is, what are some red flags and green flags? Like, how do you know if a therapist is good or not? And I'm going to answer this based on what I hold as my value system with my clients and kind of what I've sought out in my own therapists that I've had over the last several decades. So the first thing I always want people to look for is flexibility of service. What does that mean, right? Most therapists are going to say to their clients, I'll see you every week and we'll work on your treatment goals. Now, there are intensive therapists who can help you actually customize the sequence and timing of your treatment, right? Because not everybody wants to come in every single week. Not everybody wants to only work for 50-minute sessions. People have shit to do, right? Another appointment on the calendar isn't always helpful. But why do we have weekly sessions? Well, because it's what the insurance companies will reimburse. That is the answer. There is literally no other clinical reason why that always makes sense. So you have this very small population of therapists who understand this and work intensively, right? So I do this in my practice. I teach other clinicians how to do this with the intensive design kit. But essentially, you can customize your client's speed of progress towards treatment goals. You can work more efficiently, right? If you have longer sessions, because you don't have to open up the session, do the work, close up the session, right? That's if you have a juicy 90 minutes or 2 hours, or sometimes people even fly in and work with me for 3 and 4 hours for several days, you get so much done. And I love this model because I'm a very impatient person and because I have stuff to do as a therapist, right? Here's another green flag for a therapist. You should not be going into a therapeutic relationship with a therapist under the assumption that I'll see you next week forever. The idea that you should see a therapist every single week forever or for some undisclosed period of time is literally insane to me. And I know this has been the traditional model of therapy for some specialties. But as an EMDR clinician, when I have somebody come and work with me, I will say to them, you and I are not going to know each other forever because I want you to get better and I want you to have relief in your body so that you don't need me anymore. And I'm going to love you and care about you and guide you and be with you. And we are going to say goodbye at some point. Now, I'll always be here for you if you need me. But this is not we're not entering a marriage contract, for better or for worse, till death do us part, okay? So having a therapist who has actual treatment goals, who has flexibility in how they work. If you go get a therapist who takes insurance, chances are they will only work with you in the weekly model because you want to get the charge reimbursed with your insurance company. That's the assumption, right? But it's limiting people who are like, no, I want to feel better right now. Actually, I feel like shit, okay? Here is the third green flag. When you're with your therapist, they should be mirroring back to you every single positive belief on your belief inventory guide. If you don't know what a belief inventory guide is, please subscribe to the Zero Disturbance mailing list as a client. You will get a Zero Disturbance client library full of free resources that kind of go with different podcast episodes to help you Get really clear about what is inside of you, what you want for yourself, what you want it to look like and be like. Okay, I have a beautiful worksheets that I actually use with my clients in my practice. I'm giving them to you for free. So noticing your belief inventory guide, right? There are 4 categories in EMDR of positive and negative cognitions. The first one is basically like defectiveness of self, like, am I good or am I bad? And under that are like, am I worthy? I deserve love. Am I attractive, right? So am I good or bad? My goodness, that's number 1, right? Number 2 is like shame and responsibility, okay? Number 3 is typically around safety. And number 4 is all around control and choice and power. I love that bucket. So here's the green flag. Your therapist should mirror to you that every single positive belief in those categories is true when you are in the presence of that therapist, okay? This is what good enough parents do, okay? I'm not telling therapists to parent their clients. We're not infantilizing adult clients. They're not babies, okay? But we are consciously mirroring to them. We are seeing them as having the potential to actualize into all of these positive cognitions. Because if we don't hold it as a therapist, how are they going to know it's true if they never got it before, okay? And it's interesting too, it's not just in like what the therapist says, but it's how they say it and the clinical choices they make. I noticed that with EMDR in particular, there are a lot of protocols and rules and algorithms and like all of that's amazing. And I noticed that clinicians hold that really rigidly and tightly. And they'll say to their clients things like, well, we have to do this because the protocol says X, Y, and Z, right? You can't talk in between sets because you're not supposed to. Or we have to start with the first and worst trauma target because it's like there needs to be an element of power, control, and choice in clinical decisions, in treatment planning, in everything. So if the clinician's not giving that to you, what that tells you is that they don't have a healthy relationship with their positive beliefs around control, power, and choice because they are so rigidly bowing down to a standard rigid protocol, okay? So food for thought. So those are my biggest red and green flags for therapists, whether you're a talk therapist or EMDR therapist. So I hope that's helpful to clients. I hope that's helpful for clinicians to chew on and think about. And now I want to kind of segue into what I hear asked a lot. And I think I finally have an answer that I feel good about for now. So the question I have is, how do you know you're done with talk therapy? How do you know that you want to segue from talk therapy into a brain-based modality therapy like EMDR or brain spotting or art, right? And having been in talk therapy myself for a very, very long time, I am incredibly grateful that it exists. And I was put into a weekly model for a very, very long time, for years with different talk therapy clinicians. And it's no one's fault. That's how they're trained. That's the expectations set up by the insurance companies. But it was time consuming. It was not efficient. And it was expensive, very expensive. Okay. So I think that we know we're done with talk therapy when it's been a long time, when it's been expensive. And you kind of have a sense of like, well, I have all my tools. And also like, it's exhausting to use my tools. And as an EMDR therapist, the way I think about most therapeutic tools, like breath work, meditation, exercise, like things we're supposed to do to help us calm down, right? Like putting ice on our face and hands if we're having a panic attack. Like I love that these tools exist. Not knocking them. What I am saying is that it takes energy to have a body response to something. Sometimes we call that a negative trigger. And then it takes energy to think of when you're dysregulated, what's the tool I should use? And then go use that tool. Because maybe we're out at the grocery store and we don't want to use a tool in public because it's not appropriate or we're not comfortable doing that, right? It's vulnerable. So I think that the tools we get in talk therapy are helpful. And the way that I think about them as an EMDR therapist is they're kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound, try this Band-Aid, try this Band-Aid, we'll try this Band-Aid. We can be reactive to hurt. Nothing wrong with that, okay? But the reason I only do EMDR all day, every day, and have done over 10,000 sessions here in my office in California is because I want to actually heal the wound and forget the Band-Aids. Like, why do we keep buying Band-Aids? No, like, let's just take care of the source, soothe it, heal it, desensitize it with EMDR or brain spotting or art, right? A brain-based modality that takes all of the cognitions, the positive cognitions, the curriculum, the content from the books we read. I mean, look at all these books right behind me. All the things our therapists tell us in talk therapy, like, well, you should think you're beautiful and you should think you're smart and like, let's work on your self-talk, like fantastic. And it's going to bump up against the body, right? The body keeps the score. The body has another curriculum, incongruent. How do we drop the curriculum down into our body so that the source of the pain is completely soothed? EMDR can do this. And I know this because I do it in my office with my clients and I do it as a client of EMDR, okay? So let's stop wasting Band-Aids. That's kind of the point you have to get with talk therapy to say like, I'm stagnant, okay? I get a lot of people coming in to see me who have been to lots of talk therapists and they have great resources in their minds, lots of positive things and resources we can link to and drop down. So it's not a waste of time and it's not wrong. It's not bad to have talk therapy. There just needs to be a point when you realize maybe for me, this isn't working anymore in the way that I need it to, okay? For some people, talk therapy is amazing and they're fine and they're out living their life, okay? So that's how you know you're done. So how do you know that you are ready to segue from talk therapy to EMDR? Let's talk about this. There's two roads here. You can either stay with your talk therapist and go work with an EMDR therapist as an adjunct therapist, which means that the three of you work together on treatment planning, right? And the EMDR clinician does targeted goals and targeted treatment planning to support what you're doing in talk therapy. That's option one. So no one has to break up with their talk therapist. A lot of us get really attached to our talk therapist because we have been with them for so long, because they have seen us through so many things, and we have a relationship, and that's meaningful. So adjunct EMDR therapy is something that we can think about in that situation if you don't want to break up or take a pause from your talk therapist, because there are some states where you can't actually have two therapists at once. Very silly to me because I'm allowed to have 5 different kinds of physicians here in California, right? I have a primary, I have an OB, I have dermatology, I have a surgeon, like I have endocrine, like I have a buffet of physicians. But in some states in the United States, you can't have more than one therapist. This is a stupid law. But if you want to pause with your talk therapist because you live in a state like that, you can work with the EMDR therapist and go back and see what's left, if anything, to work on. Sometimes we want to keep our talk therapist because we just want to check in with somebody every week about how life is going. And that's okay. Everyone gets to choose what they need. Okay. So what if you have to break up with your talk therapist because they don't have the secure self to say, you're right. We do have all this cognitive curriculum that we've built in your mind in talk therapy. And you're right, it's not dropping down into your body. And that's not your fault. And that's not my fault. It's just because we don't have a way to integrate those things and drop it in. You're still having panic attacks. Or maybe now we've got you on medication in talk therapy, and maybe you're just feeling numbed out from the medicine and you can't access anxiety, but you also can't access a lot of joy. And that sucks, right? These are real conversations that happen very often, okay? So it might be an option for you to break up with a talk therapist if they do not support you working in a brain-based modality so that your body gets to feel calm, right? If they feel offended by what you're saying, if they don't offer this to you, right? If they're just kind of like, la-di-da, I have a client every week for 10 years, like do-do-do, and it doesn't even dawn on them that maybe that's not what's best for you, because you're still suffering or you're still not happy or you're still not getting what you want, your body still feels incongruent with what the thoughts are you're trying to think, that's a red flag. That's a huge red flag. Okay. So I hope this is helpful. I am going to get into the last question for today's episode, and it is so rich. I'm going to get a lot of emails. I'm going to get a lot of emails about this part, but that's fine. I love a thoughtful conversation. I'm open to debate. It's how we learn. Okay, so let's say you either have chosen with your talk therapist to do adjunct EMDR. Maybe you want to do it in an intensive model so that it's quick. Maybe you're pausing your talk therapy to go back. Maybe you've broken up with your talk therapist and you're just like, I want an EMDR therapist. Let's go. I'm ready. Right. And that's my primary therapist. Okay. So those are kind of the choices. So how do we find a fantastic EMDR therapist? Oh, so I want to give you a list of questions. This will be available to you in your Zero Disturbance client library for free. Okay. So you can listen to me kind of talk through this, but you'll have all the questions available to you so that when you go on Psychology Today or Kambria or some kind of therapeutic directory that has EMDR clinicians listed, you'll know exactly what to ask. Okay. This is more important than like buying a car or buying a house or it's kind of like dating. Like you're making a partnership with somebody that's really, really vulnerable. And we need to make sure that this person is competent and that they know clearly what you expect from your treatment. Okay, so you're gonna hear some of my preferred expectations that you would have for yourself of what I think you deserve when you start EMDR with the right person. Okay, so if you don't have access to the Zero Disturbance client library, if you opt in as a client anywhere in the world, you don't have to work with me. You can be a client of anybody, or a soon-to-be client, then you can opt in and you'll get access to the library and we add things to it all the time. It's all free, okay? And you'll get updates on the podcast episodes coming out for more free content. Okay, so here's the list of what we ask our EMDR clinician. And also, you can ask your current EMDR therapist this if you feel like something's weird or off and you kind of want to like tweak and recenter, bring these questions into your therapist, okay? All right. So the first thing we're going to be assessing for is their responsibility for their competence. That's a different flavor than competence. Okay. That's a different flavor than like, oh, I'm basic trained or certified or a consultant. Like this is their responsibility for being competent forever. Because guess what? You don't become a therapist and then go sit on the couch and say, I'll do my CEUs. No, like if you're in a brain-based modality therapy, you have to learn about the brain forever because the rate of information we're learning about this is just so accelerated. Okay. So here's what you want to ask them under their responsibility for competence. You want to ask them, when were you trained? Okay. And then you want to ask them, are you basic trained? Are you EMDR certified? Or are you an EMDR consultant? Those are 3 different levels of competence. Okay. And they each have different requirements for the advanced levels of learning, for the exposure to numbers of client sessions, supervision they're supposed to get. Okay. So are you basic trained, certified, or a consultant? When were you trained? And then here's what you have to ask. How many sessions have you done with EMDR? Because here's what's true. People go to basic training in EMDR and they're like, this is so cool. And then they go back to their office and they're like, oh my God, how do I do this again? And they kind of freeze and they don't use it. Okay. So you can ask them, okay, you were trained in 2018. Great. How many sessions have you done since then with EMDR? They say 5 sessions. That's a red light. Okay. Okay. Are you in consultation? They should always be in consultation, either leading a consultation group so they hear other cases from other clinicians, or in a peer group, they have to be in some kind of consultation for cases. Here's a question I love. Do you get EMDR as a client? And this question is important because, like for me, I'm an EMDR consultant. I've done, 10,000 EMDR sessions in my office in California. It's all I do, right? And I was basic trained in 2016. Okay. So I get EMDR as a client frequently, at least once a month, because it's amazing for me to experience it as a client, to remember what it feels like to have empathy and connection with my clients who are doing this work. It's like a remembering to respect what they're doing, because sometimes it's really hard. And I'm watching my EMDR therapist and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, I'm in the experience as a therapist learning in an applied experiential learning setting, and I'm a client receiving it, okay? So your EMDR therapist has got to be in their own EMDR therapy. Also, red flag, if any therapist, whether they're brain-based or talk therapy, is not in their own therapy, run away. It is an ethical requirement that all therapists are in their own therapy. Otherwise, how could we do this job? Okay. Here's a question. This is like the frosting on the cake for responsibility for competence. Are you confident in yourself? And if you don't want to ask the words because that feels like a lot, notice the energy. Is this potential EMDR clinician confident? Not a narcissist, but like, do they have belief in themselves they can figure things out? Okay, you need that as the client if you're going to go into this EMDR world and check it out. Here's another frosting on the cake question. What's your favorite positive cognition? Okay, as an EMDR clinician, we have a list of negative and positive beliefs. And when we do a target setup, we want to make sure that the client moves from a negative belief to a positive belief. Okay, I have some favorites. I'll share them with you. My favorite positive beliefs are, I can figure things out and I have choices. Because I feel like if I can embody those beliefs and hold that energy for the client, then they can figure things out. They can figure out how to do EMDR with me. They can figure out what they want to work on. They can figure out anything. And if they believe in their body, I have choices, then the world is their oyster. Okay, so ask your potential EMDR therapist, what are your favorite positive beliefs? And back in your client library, in your zero disturbance client library, we have a belief inventory guide, right? So you can really get a sense of what those positive and negative cognitions are and get a sense of how they have been impacted inside of you, okay? So make sure you check that out. And here's the last one. And again, this is all about responsibility of competence and learning. What are your growing edges and blind spots as a clinician? The reason that I want you to ask that question out loud is because you need to understand that if that clinician's growing edges and blind spots, not if, when they come into the therapeutic relationship, you need to be clear that, oh, that's their shit, not mine. Like, I'm not doing it wrong. That's their blind spot. If you ask these questions while you're talking to your potential EMDR therapist and they won't answer them and they think that these are inappropriate, red flag, run away. Okay? Red flag, run away. All right. I have some methodology questions that you want to ask. And by the way, when you go in to interview your EMDR clinician, whether it's virtual or a phone call, you're going to blow their mind because they're going to know, wow, this person actually knows what they're talking about. Like, they actually have a sense of what this is. They have a sense of, the questions are really nuanced. Like, the right person for you will get really excited about getting the privilege to work with you because you're coming in with these questions assertively. It shows a lot of resourcing to be able to do this, okay? And if these questions are hard for you, that's clinical information to share with your therapist, okay? All right, so let's go through the methodology questions. Okay, so you really, really want to make sure to ask them around methodology. When we do EMDR together, are you going to ask me to do a trauma timeline? Are you going to ask me to write down every traumatic thing that's ever happened to me? Or are you going to assess my beliefs, my positive and negative beliefs, okay? Why is this important? Because I believe that it is actually really traumatic for most clients, not all, but for most clients in EMDR to have to write down every single traumatic event. It is clinically unnecessary to do this if it's triggering the client, if it's hard for the client, if it's painful for the client, because a lot of people have never said out loud or written down or have to be faced with a list like that. It is overwhelming, and I think it is one of the biggest barriers for people to get treatment, okay? Why is a belief inventory gentler and also more clinically helpful? Well, I'll tell you. If you were to bring the belief inventory guide in your zero disturbance client library into your therapy session, and you were to say, here's a list of all my positive beliefs and how strong they are, here's a list of all my negative beliefs and how strong they are, the actual details of the traumatic event are not as important in treatment as what was learned or decided, the positive and negative beliefs, what was stored in the body sensation, the emotion attached to that memory, and the adaptation or urge in response. Freeze, fight, flight, right? Fawning, okay? So ask this clinician, please, do you require your clients to do a trauma timeline, writing down traumatic events, or do you use a belief inventory assessment? Okay, that's question number 1 for methodology. Question number 2 is about resourcing for phase 2. Ask your clinician, when it's time for you to resource me, first of all, do you do that or do you skip that? If they say skip, run away. Run away. That's just like such a deviation from basic training. That's terrifying. And then you want to ask them, okay, if you resource me in phase 2, what are the resources that you can give me? If they say, oh, I have these 3 from basic training, Calmer, Safe Place, Lightstream, Container, right? Run away, because there's so much more customized resourcing in phase 2, okay? Let me be more specific. There are a lot of clients who don't want to install a calm or safe place because being calm or safe was not a safe thing to do. And so all that clients' urges or adaptations to get calm and get safe are going to come in, and the resource isn't going to work, right? And then the clinician has a tendency sometimes to say, well, this isn't working, we can't resource you. But really the clinician doesn't have enough options available, customized to your belief inventory guide. Okay. Target planning. This is phase 3 of EMDR. Ask your EMDR therapist before you sign up with them, before you're their client. Ask them, in phase 3, when we're target planning, do you like to go to first or worst memory? Or will you let me start where I want to start? Okay. In EMDR, there's 3 prongs of time. There's past, things have happened in the past that are traumatic. Present, which is like current triggers that are kind of linking to what happened before, and then future. I have some clients come in and they say, I don't want to say what happened, I don't want to write it down, and I don't want to start there at the event. That is most disturbing. Now, in basic training, a lot of EMDR clinicians are taught start with the first memory, traumatic memory, the earliest back you can go in the neural networks, or the worst. Now, most clients don't want to do this. Again, this is another huge barrier for people getting access to care that they desperately need. So stop doing this. If you're a clinician, stop saying we have to do first and worst. We have to float back and find the touchstone memory, the source of everything. You're gonna float back. You're gonna get there, but don't push it on the client. Let them choose. Again, because we just said a green flag of a healthy therapist is reflecting back, mirroring back to them all of the positive beliefs around safety, control, choice, and power. The client has choices in the therapeutic relationship on their terms because that didn't happen before, most likely. That's why they're with you, okay? Okay. And if this is getting clinical for people that are listening that are clients or soon to be clients, think about it kind of like a pool. I did an episode on this in the Rebranding Trauma Therapy series earlier. I talked about how when we learn how to swim, right, because EMDR is just learning something different or rewiring something. When we learn how to swim, we don't jump in the deep end of the damn pool. We typically hang out on the side of the pool, put our feet over the edge, kind of maybe go into the shallow end a little bit, see how the water feels, see if my swim coach is a cool person. Do I feel safe with this person? Go first and worst with target sequencing in phase 3. First earliest memory, the worst, that's the deep end. What the hell? If they want to do that, fine. But don't say that's what we're going to do if you're a clinician, okay? Red flag. Perfect. Let's do more methodology questions. I want you to ask your potential EMDR therapist, how do you customize your treatment plan, resources, and interweaves for me? What's an interweave? An interweave is something that the therapist says to you in phase 4 of EMDR as you're processing a trauma target. In basic training, the therapist is taught to say 2 things like a damn robot. Notice that, go with that. It's not wrong or bad, but we can do better, okay? Now, we will talk about how to customize interweaves for each client in a later episode. But for now, I just want you to ask your EMDR therapist, will you customize interweaves for me beyond notice that, go with that? Because who wants to do therapy with a robot? I don't. That feels weird to me. Okay. This is the last one around methodology. And again, if you want to have the full checklist of this conversation for you to utilize, it'll be in your client library, okay? All right, last methodology point. I want you to say to your EMDR clinician that you're going to start to work with, I want more than just clearing trauma targets in the past prong. I want all of my positive cognitions on the positive and negative cognition belief inventory guide. I want my positive beliefs to be actualized and to give me armor for the world. It's not enough just to clear the trauma and heal the wound. I want expansion. I want performance enhancement. I want full confidence integration of self. We talked about this in the last episode. If you missed it, check it out. It's amazing. Ask your therapist, do you know how to work in the present and future prong with EMDR to expand my positive beliefs? Ask them that. And here's why. Because if you missed the last episode, I'll give you a quick summary. A lot of EMDR therapists, and again, not their fault, are told and trained to only clear trauma targets and not actually use EMDR in the present and future prong of time. They're not actually encouraged to create more mental health. The mindset is, I'm going to clear mental illness, okay? You deserve better than that. The EMDR clinicians deserve better than that, quite frankly. Otherwise, we're just outsourcing to coaches, which isn't bad, but we can do better, okay? Because we have a ton of training to do the trauma work and the positive expansion resourcing congruency inside, okay? So I hope this is feeling like it's helpful. I hope it feels in service to you. Y'all deserve the best therapeutic experience, the best, okay? We partner with people, we have friends, and they can be duds. I don't want you to have a dud experience in therapy because I want it to feel efficient. I want it to feel customized. I want it to feel like you're empowered during the process so that you can feel empowered outside of session. I want all of these things for you. And if you're a therapist listening to this, I am tasking you with incorporating these things as your role, as your core role for your clients to give them these things because you know they deserve it. You know they deserve it. And you as a therapist deserve to feel like, I'm excellent. I'm freaking excellent, okay? So as always, I really appreciate having very thoughtful clinical conversations with all of you. And I really appreciate you being here. I look forward to being together next time in the next episode. And until then, please take care and be well.